Coming up this week on the Markcast, the XFL is looking for investors, but who should be buying into the XFL?
I will look on your treasures, Gypsy. Is this understood? I will look on them.
Please do.
Who is this lady you have shrunk? Was she the owner of this house that you camp in front of?
I welcome Sportico's Brendan Coffey to the show to discuss his findings and reports of the XFL seeking investors ahead of their 2023 season.
There's a lot of demand these days to invest in sports and sports-related properties, so I don't think they'll have a problem finding a partner. I think they can pick and choose who they want.
And then NFL cuts are happening across the board. We're tracking USFL players, Cavante Turpin sticking with the Cowboys, other players winding up on the practice squad. Ric Serritella of NFL Draft Bible joins the show talking about XFL and USFL's place as it relates to getting players into the NFL.
Well, even if it's just one guy, that's considered a success, right? Because you just got paid. Cavante Turpin just got paid, and that's the whole point of a spring league, is to get you an opportunity. And, maybe those other 50 guys did not make the final 53-man roster, but they got another look, probably because they laid down some solid film in the USFL.
And then Matthew Scianitti of TSN joins the show. Matthew on location in Montreal ahead of this weekend's games. We're talking all the craziness of the CFL this week, including Vernon Adams Jr. heading to the BC Lions and Gary Stern stepping down from day-to-day operations for the Montreal Alouettes.
Revisionist history sometimes being 2020, oftentimes being 2020. Yes, I think things would have been different if Gary Stern was still part of the ownership group.
And then Cody Grace of the Calgary Stampeders joins me. Really eclectic show this week. Hope you guys enjoy. Like and subscribe. Hey guys, welcome to the Markcast. Reed here. Thank you guys all so much for stopping by today. Really exciting show, really eclectic show. A busy week in football with the NFL cuts happening ahead of the season kickoff next week. Running into issues, sometimes talking with reporters. Hey, can I get you to talk about XFL right now? Lots of focus, obviously, on the NFL. That is going to be interesting for me and us to track here on the podcast as we approach the February kickoff of the XFL. Still waiting on team names, still waiting on uniforms, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, the draft coming up. But, a lot of focus of the sports media is on the NFL right now, and justifiably so. So it'll be really interesting to see where all that, winds up here. We had our live stream the other day, Andy Murray and I talking about that, as well as the big Vernon Adams Jr. news and Gary Stern and all that with the Alouettes. But a big show today. We have Brendan Coffey of Sportico joining us. Brendan had his report a couple weeks ago now about the XFL looking for investors. I know we've talked about that a little bit. Really curious to get Brendan's thoughts on that in terms of leagues like the USFL and the XFL seeking money. Does Brendan think that there's a good chance that these leagues will find people to want to invest? Sports media is such a valuable property right now. Lots of people wanting to get involved in that. Really interested to get Brendan's thoughts. Really appreciate him coming on. Then, like I said, off the top in the promo, huge week, NFL cuts, right? We're tracking, the Cavante Turpins of the world, everyone, the 51 from the USFL getting whittled down, right? Some of the players are ending up on practice squads, which is great. Obviously, we want to see the success of the USFL players, especially kind of latching on where they can, hopefully, continuing to fight their way onto a roster. Ric Serritella comes on today with NFL Draft Bible. Rick is involved in player scouting, and just really fascinating conversation with him. Where do the XFL and USFL fit into the football landscape? What is success of players like Cavante Turpin, latching on to the Cowboys, getting that big deal there. Where does that fit into the whole landscape of football? Rick also gives his thoughts here as we approach the XFL draft in November. What players might be eligible for that? Are they looking more towards the XFL or the USFL? Rick talks a lot with the key players involved in both the XFL and the USFL. Really valuable to get Rick's opinions and thoughts on that. Really appreciate that. Lots of CFL stuff this week. As I mentioned, Andrew Murray and I did a live stream Wednesday as you were listening to this. On the midday, talking about the Vernon Adams Jr. news, heading to the BC Lions. I have my hat on. Tremendously exciting for BC. I gave a lot of my thoughts on that live stream. That's on the YouTube and the audio feeds if you want to check that out. We have Matthew Scianitti joining today. Matthew on location in Montreal, getting ready for the Red Blacks game this weekend, talking through all the, Montreal having to find new ownership here, potentially heading forward. The Vernon Adams heading to the BC Lions. What does that mean for Trevor Harris? Do we need a new face for the Montreal Alouettes franchise? I really appreciate Matthew's thoughts. Thought he was great. And then Cody Grace, courtesy of the Calgary Stampeders, coming on as well. I really appreciate the team over there for setting that up. Always appreciate, the CFL teams working with me. This crazy American podcaster, talking, players via Zoom and kind of setting up all that stuff. Really appreciate that. Before we go, at the end of the show, we have some more giveaway news. I have some photos that people have sent in that have received items. But don't forget, we have our big Spring League signed football here. This is the last week. I think I'm going to oodle you guys with this, and then I am going to mail this to friend of the show, Brian Scott, who played with this very football in the Spring League Veterans Day game back in 2020. Brian is going to autograph this ball. Not Brian Wood sits on there. Brian Scott is going to interview this. Played a baller game. I think he had 4 touchdowns the game that they played with this. Brian's going to sign it, mail it back to me. I have his address. And then this is going to be the item for our big 2,500 subscriber giveaway. We also have a lot of other items coming up, the Jousters jersey, Generals jerseys, Blues, and all that kind of stuff. Lots of Spring League merchandise, but I know you guys are going to want this ball for the big 2,500 subscriber giveaway. So, like and subscribe, share the podcast, help us grow. Lots of excitement here. Even with the NFL season starting, obviously still tracking XFL, USFL, and all that stuff. Should have a tremendous show next week if all goes according to plan. I have one interview already scheduled for Sunday to get that out of the way because this gentleman's schedule is so busy, and then should have some other excitement coming up as well. Again, like and subscribe. Thank you guys all so much for your support, and take care. Well, I'm excited today. We have Brendan Coffey here, Sportico, sports finance reporter, talking all things XFL, Redbird, everything else. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks, Reed. Good to see you.
Yeah, so you guys had the article come out, Sportico, XFL, looking for, investing. Obviously now in the news this week, Redbird, finally acquiring AC Milan. I kind of wanted to get just all your thoughts on the XFL, Redbird in general. What do you make of the ownership group and the XFL here headed into 2023?
Yeah. I mean, everyone knows, the Rock's involved. He's the big name there. Obviously he brings a lot of goodwill, and he and his business partner and ex-wife, Dani Garcia, are running it. But Redbird, which people may not know, certainly outside of finance, is a large private equity fund, an investment fund that's been investing in sports properties, media properties, some consumer and energy vehicles for about the past decade. And it's run by a guy named Jerry Cardinal, who, if you're in the sports business, you know Jerry, or you know of Jerry. So, they bring a lot of, he brings a lot of connections, brings a lot of insight, and has a great track record of success.
So, we've been tracking the USFL of it all and Fox and kind of that whole business model right here, Redbird with the XFL coming out that they, Fox is trying to eventually finance out these teams, right? Get these franchises out, get, people, owners in. But with the XFL coming out, your guys is reporting that they're looking for investors here headed into the season, right? Potentially giving up 35 to 45% of the company. Mike Mitchell was kind of reporting on that as well. Like, thoughts on that coming out before they've even kicked off?
They're looking for, to get the XFL to kick off, and then bring in new money, new investors to help grow the league. They bought it 2 years ago for $15 million and maybe up to $9 million in assumed debt from Vince McMahon, right? They've been funding it till now, and I think it's pretty par for the course. In a business arrangement like this, to want to bring in new money, right? And it's not just about the money It's about probably bringing in strategic partners that will have more of an interest in making sure the XFL is successful. Now, who would that be? I mean, that's all speculation, but you could see certainly other investment funds. Maybe you get a media partner in there too. There's a lot of demand these days to invest in sports and sports-related properties. So I don't think they'll have a problem finding a partner. I think they can pick and choose who they want.
You do feel confident of them in terms of, because Fox is trying to do the same thing in a different regard than the other. So I'm just trying to, the appetite to find people to want to invest in these, B-list alternative football leagues.
Well, you have to take a step back and look at sports in general. And there's a lot of money, a lot of institutional money that wants to get into sports. And what's institutional money? That's everything from private equity to venture capital, to everything like pension funds and insurance companies, places that want to find a place to put their money that they can be pretty confident is going to be stable and grow over the long term. And so, I think we've all heard about the great growth and valuations of the mainstream, the major pro leagues, right? The NFL, MLB, NBA. How over the years, teams that, for instance, Jerry Jones bought the Dallas Cowboys for $140 million in 1989. That now it's the most valuable sports franchise on earth, right? I forget what we have at Sportico, but I think it's $7 billion or more. So that kind of growth that outpaces the stock market over time, but that also is pretty shielded from recessions and consumer worries and things like that. It's has a lot of appeal to institutional money, and you see a lot of these funds just getting a lot of investor money. So Redbird, for instance, which is part of the XFL, as we've said, they're raising a new fund that they're confident they're going to get $2.6 billion in new money to invest, on top of the existing fund that owns part of the XFL that has $2.6 billion, and an earlier fund before that has about another $3 billion. So, and there are a number of other private equity funds that want to get into sports. So, to some extent, they have this money. These funds have this money that has to go to work. So, something like the XFL, we'll get some interest for sure.
I guess, and I'm obviously not the genius sports reporter person, that you are in terms of covering this, but like, if Redbird's managing all this money, and then the XFL is like, hey, we need more. Like, why isn't Redbird investing more? Or does that happen? Is that, it seems like they're reaching out to this, RJP, right, partners or whatever, to come in to help raise that capital in terms of like looking inward.
Yeah, well, yeah, they've hired PJT partners to help them find partners. In this business, it's very much strategic relationships, right? So, there are a few aspects to it. The main one is the relationships. I think they want to find partners who are going to be invested in the XFL, help make it a winner, right? Because there are competing, other football leagues out there, as you know, right? There's USFL and CFL, and of course the NFL. Along with college, so they want people who are going to help the XFL grow over time. And I think in part by bringing in outside money, it does take a little bit of the pressure off, The Rock and Danny Garcia and Redbird too, with having to continue to put more money into the league. So, to an extent there is that, right? An investment fund like Redbird, while they want the XFL to succeed and are confident that they will get it to succeed, it's also part of the plan to kind of diversify the risk a little and bring in others to help bear the load.
Because that's the feedback I've gotten kind of even on the podcast and guests and stuff. It's like, we'll see, this just proves, Rock and Danny, rich people stay rich because they don't, they want to bring in, they don't want, and you're saying that's not necessarily the case?
Yeah, the indications we've gotten at Sportico isn't that they want to cash out. It's not. They don't want investors to pay them for their equity. They will surrender their equity to people who bring new money to help fund the XFL. That's what I've heard from our various sources. It's not about cashing out. It really is about kind of expanding the pie. And so I don't know what the exact ownership is between the three parties. But say they each owned a third. Well, maybe they each give up 10% to create space for new investors to buy in with equity. And for a fund like Redbird, that's actually kind of a positive, because when you get a new round of investment, then you get a new valuation for the league that Redbird can then put on its books and say, hey, we've already returned 10% or 20% or 30% on this continuing investment.
Does the fact that and I believe your report came out with Sportico, and I think Mike Mitchell, who does he's our XFL alt football reporter, yeah. I think had reached out and upwards of 35 to 45% of the equity stake that they're willing to kind of, like you said, surrender for that. I've had a lot of people like, wow, that is a lot of equity in something to give up this early. I always try to equate like the Shark Tank, like that's kind of always my and I'd rather own 10% of something than something whatever. But like, what do you make of that large of a percentage of equity being given up potentially?
I think to some extent it's practical, because if you wanted to bring in, and again, it's speculation, I could throw names out there, but say they wanted to bring in you see a lot of cross investments now between sports organizations buying into other sports organizations, right? We just had the Yankees buy into Redbird's purchase of AC Milan, for instance, which closed today or yesterday. By giving it that, by freeing up that much equity, you're probably getting to a minimum investment level that a lot of high net worth investors or investment funds would want. We can't be bothered with 1%, and giving you $500,000. We're looking to spend $5 million, $10 million or more, and depending on how the value they hang on the XFL come February when they want to close this new round of investment, they want to be able to provide that to the type of investors they want to attract.
Yeah, this is all speculation. So no, you're good. Yeah. You're good. Welcome to my life on the Markcast. This is all that we have right now is speculating. But it's interesting feedback, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's not unusual, right? All the major pro leagues, at least in the U.S. and Canada, they have minimum ownership requirements. They don't want to sell, tiny fractions to people. I believe the NBA is a minimum 5% ownership level. You can't have an owner who owns less than 5% if you want to sell part of the team. And similarly in the NFL and baseball might be a little bit different, but you get the idea. And they, I think they want to do that too. Is they don't want a gazillion tiny people to buy into the XFL. They'd like to have a few, maybe have a dozen.
In terms of it's just like the amount of money, right? Talking with spring football, Vince McMahon, had allocated like 350 million, right? Coming into XFL 2020, and obviously COVID, all that stuff kind of fell apart. But now, Redbird and them coming in, it's like 100 million, knowing that they're going to have to bring in more money. Like, just curious your thoughts on like the expense of like launching a professional football league here and everything from the ground up is both USFL and XFL are trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the XFL expenses are, but right, we know from college football, right, that it's expensive to run a football team. So there are capital requirements. Having the TV deals, the Disney deal helps a lot. That probably brings a whole lot of revenue and a little bit of cost certainty into it. But I can't imagine it's cheap.
Thoughts on Redbird with AC Milan now kind of doing that, acquiring that, working with the XFL, like Redbird just trying to like expand their profile here in huge ways kind of on the worldwide stage.
They do, and the investment themes behind buying like AC Milan, and the XFL, and some of the other things they do. Right, they own a stake in a T20 cricket team in India. Another soccer team they own. They're probably best known for having a sizable stake in Fenway Sports Group, right, which owns the Red Sox and the Pittsburgh Penguins now, and Liverpool. The macro theme for all of that, not just with Redbird, but with all the sort of major investors you're seeing, is this idea that sports is a great media play, right? It's not that Jerry Cardinal and Redbird don't care about the competition and the sports aspect. They do, but when you talk to people in the sports business investing side, they really view sports as a media play. So XFL is a media play. AC Milan, is a media play. There's a lot of expectations that soccer will become more important to viewers in the U.S. But as I said, with all of these, it's every sports property is a way to provide content to the media companies, which are willing to pay a premium for that content, because it's the one thing people watch nowadays regularly, live, the sports.
Curious your thoughts on just, obviously you cover the finance of it, but just, spring football in general here, right? We have two competing properties here in the spring, both looking, both believing, Fox is all in on this, Redbird, and just your thoughts on that here in 2022, 2023, we're going to have, all these major networks kind of competing in the spring for football.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating, and you would think that time of year is pretty full already, right? You have almost every league going at that time. But I was just looking at the USFL's ratings over the course of the past season, and while they took a nosedive toward the end of the season, there was still better or comparable to things like the NBC's Premier League broadcasts, and what the Yankees get on a New York Yankees get on a really good game matchup during the regular season in New York, New Jersey. So for just the ability to command that many eyeballs, even when it's spring football, it's not established. There's plenty of other things to draw people's attention. That's pretty impressive. If you're asking me if there's room for many alternative football leagues playing at the same time, that I don't know. That's a tough one.
I appreciate your insights where you say just the fact that you don't anticipate either XFL or Fox having issues attracting people, to invest because sports media is such a hot property right now.
Yeah. I mean, and you see it. You see it across sports. You see investments and a lot of money going after, things that have that at least at first glance have less of a likelihood to pay off as opposed to football, which people love, and we know from the NFL at least is almost bulletproof. You see a lot of money going into things that at first glance you don't know. Well, what is the financial payoff down the line? For instance, you're seeing a lot of investment in minor league baseball. Not to go on a tangent, but there's a lot of question about what is the financial payoff for minor league baseball in the long run. It's much more clear for something like football if you can get the league to get traction. In the spring, especially where you're not head to head with the NFL, you have a real good shot of having a good profitable product.
Any other thoughts today? Really appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's fascinating. It's great to see these all these new leagues forming. It's an exciting time to be a sports fan. It's an exciting time to write about the finance and the business deals, which I do on my end.
Well, I tell you, we get a lot of we want to talk about the X's and O's and all that stuff. This is the more fascinating thing to me. It's like, what is USFL or Fox's, or Redbird's, 5-year game plan here? That's more interesting to me than the backup starting quarterback for the Birmingham Stallions or whatever next week. So.
Well, yeah. It's a great, kind of sport, so to speak, in and of itself.
Well, Brendan, I really appreciate your time with Sportico, Sports Finance Reporter. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Reed.
Well, I'm excited today. We have Ric Serritella joining us, creator, NFL Draft Bible, advanced scout, NFL. I was looking through I was researching this morning. You have quite an extensive background and resume. Really fascinating stuff.
Thanks, Reed. I mean, when you've been at it for 2 decades, you hope you move and shake and get to know some people over the course of time. But, just like you were saying before we hopped on air, it started off as a labor of love. Always got my backbone in this industry back in the day from covering the late round or undrafted free agent guys, story of the underdog. So I've always been, kind of looking for the under the radar prospect. I always say, hey, anybody can tell you who the top 100 guys are. It's the scouts and things that we do at the NFL PA Collegiate Bowl, where we're not targeting the Senior Bowl prospects. We're looking for guys that could be late round steals or even undrafted free agent gems. And that's why, I really, really respect the heck out of CFL scouts, because it takes a certain eye to not just recognize talent, but recognize a guy that might be on the fringe or might not have all the intangibles or might be eligible, not for this year, but maybe 2-3 years down the road for the CFL. And so, yeah, man, I dabble. It's my 21st year of covering the NFL draft on NFL Draft Bible. We're now partnered with Sports Illustrated. So fortunate to be a part of that. It's my 4th year, as you mentioned, as an advanced scout at the NFL PA Collegiate Bowl. And, this past 2 years or so, I linked up with Don Yee, who created the Hub Football Camp. And during the COVID pandemic, it created a absolutely wonderful platform for street free agents trying to get into NFL facilities. I think we had about 1 in 4 guys sign an NFL or CFL contract, and I think 85 guys selected in the USFL draft. So that was pretty cool to see. And just a big advocate of alternate football, spring leagues, and talking football outside the NFL.
Well, this is good. So, I was trying to figure out, what the heck are we talking about this week? Everyone I've emailed, talked to, their NFL, we've got, cuts and all this stuff. And so I said, well, I just clearly that's what we need to be talking about, this, the NFL cuts as it relates to, who could be, for the USFL, XFL, what does that mean in terms of the viability of these spring leagues and whatever. We saw 51 USFL guys originally, make it onto kind of the extended rosters, cut down now to just 1 in terms of Cavante Turpin with the Cowboys. Michael Abernathy got cut yesterday with the Packers. Thoughts on the success of the USFL getting guys onto the rosters, and then with all the cut downs that you've seen here in the last couple weeks?
Well, even if it's just 1 guy, that's considered a success, right? Because you just got paid. Cavante Turpin just got paid. And that's the whole point of a spring league, is to get you an opportunity. And, maybe those other 50 guys did not make the final 53-man roster, but they got another look, probably because they laid down some solid film in the USFL. And, I'll tell you what, I think a lot of guys are going to recirculate on the practice squads. But at the end of the day, even if it is just 1 guy on the 53-man roster, that to me tells me that the mission of the USFL was accomplished. And just think about this. 1,000 guys just got cut. I bet you all 1,000 of them would sign up to be that 1 guy and compete to be that 1 guy that gets the opportunity to make that roster spot. So to me, the fact that, 50 plus guys that were initially overlooked got another opportunity, that's what it's about. I mean, once you get into camp, hey, it's on you. But I think that it's going to be a trend that continues to increase and continues to serve a really vital purpose, especially when you talk about the lack of development with quarterbacks and offensive linemen. You talk to the scouting community about those 2 positions and the lack of development and how maybe they're not pro ready coming out of college. Well, a developmental league, a spring league can serve as a useful purpose for these guys to get valuable reps and in-game experience, because that's what it's all about.
What's crazy about Cavante Turpin is, the journey he had to go on from, being in the spring league and going to ELF and doing the fan control football and then doing the USFL. I think I have my course right, but it wasn't like he was a sure shot. I know he had some stuff, I think in college, that maybe personal stuff that maybe was held against him originally, but it wasn't like he even just went to the USFL and got a shot. It was 4 different steps to get. I mean, it's his journey is incredible, and it just speaks to how hard it is to really make it on an NFL roster.
Oh, no doubt. And, the speed element, right? You can't teach speed, but there was some off the field stuff. So he had to go out and prove that worth. And I think the first league was the fan controlled football, if I'm not mistaken, where I saw him. And, his game didn't really translate to the indoor style, I thought. And so he didn't really go into the fan controlled football and light it up. I don't think it was the best opportunity to showcase his skill set, but it just goes to show you the love of the game, the willingness to compete. And so he goes, hey, send me over to Europe. We'll play across the pond. We'll go light up the European League of Football. Hey, NFL, you still don't want to give me a shot? I'll go play in the USFL. And, you saw it in the preseason with those 2 kick returns for touchdowns, kind of sealed the deal for his 53-man roster spot on that Dallas Cowboys roster. Oh, by the way, Michael Gallup, his status now in question for week 1. All of a sudden, maybe Cavante Turpin's playing meaningful snaps at wide receiver in addition to returning kicks. And I'll tell you what, man, NFL teams are always trying to find that diamond in the rough. Cavante Turpin is a name you're going to hear on Sundays because special teams, 1/3 of the game, you flip the field. Cavante Turpin can do that. And so I think he's going to have a significant impact with the Dallas Cowboys.
As a Washington Commanders fan, I am a little upset he chose the Cowboys to go play out. So that I won't hold that against him, but I am glad to see someone getting success, even if it is with the Cowboys.
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, listen, Washington is going to have a situation on their hands there, and maybe they'll have an XFL team back in the Washington area. So we shall see. It's going to be interesting, but now he's going to face your squad twice a year, and you got to account for that.
Were you surprised, and I don't know how thoroughly the list of guys from the USFL that were on these rosters, but other guys that didn't make it on, that got cut. I know that there was obviously injuries and things to some of the guys, but thoughts of anyone else that didn't latch on?
Victor Bolden was a guy to me. He came to the hub, was lights out. Nobody could guard him. He just was able to create separation, flash the speed, went to the USFL. I think he might have even led the USFL in receiving, I believe. But Arizona's wide receiver corps is so deep. I mean, they've got receivers on top of receivers on top of receivers out there in the desert. So I think it was a tough situation for him to make the squad. Haven't been able to keep up with everything, if they brought him back on the practice squad or not. So that one, I can't say it surprised me, but I do know that Victor Bolden can play in the National Football League, as can my guy, Greg the Torch Dortch. I mean, he's another one, kind of unguardable, return game experience, came out of Wake Forest a little bit early there and continues to develop and enhance his game. Every time I see him, Greg Dortch just looks better and better to me. And, all these teams out there looking for a developmental quarterback. I mean, Luis Perez is just developed every step of the way, from the Alliance League to the XFL to the USFL. We even had him at the hub. We actually had a hub camp at his hometown high school or hometown college out in California. And so I got a chance to get to know Louis personally. Great kid, very coachable, highly intelligent, can make all the throws. And again, it's just a matter of getting those game reps. So to me, I think Luis Perez, I see some of these quarterbacks getting recycled in the National Football League. Luis Perez has got as much upside, or if not more potential, than some of these guys I kind of see hanging out on the practice squads.
Well, that's what I don't get. I mean, and I'm the casualist of NFL fans and just kind of yelling at the TV. But I just does Louis at this point, do you just have alt football stink on you at this point? Okay, he's been around. I mean, I still hear every day my Good Morning Football talking is Daniel Jones the future? And I'm like, I know there's politicking and contracts and there's rookie deal, all this kind of stuff, but that you wouldn't give someone, I know Kyle Sloter came in as well, and he, with Jacksonville for at least the one preseason game, that you wouldn't give some of these guys, try something new versus kind of recycle what you have.
Yeah, I think in a way, one of the hardest things to do as a player is to kind of reverse the label. So a lot of times, the last time an NFL scout might see you is at that pro day workout, and maybe they're not keeping tabs on these alternate leagues like they should be. But I think what happens in the case of a Luis Perez is he kind of gets labeled, hey, he was only a one-year starter, came out of Texas A&M Commerce. Is there really a lot to work with there? And, when he's on, he's really on. And so you've really got to just consistency for him is key. But I think changing the narrative and, changing that label that scouts might have put on you last time they saw you. I think Chris Odom is a guy. When I was working with the guys at College Gridiron Showcase, and we had Chris Odom out of Arkansas State, he came in. We gave him the defensive MVP of the week. So he dominated there, said, no doubt this kid can play, kind of was in that tweener hybrid size, and he was labeled and he was miscast, goes to the USFL, I think he led the league in sacks there. Forget whose camp he was in. I know he was recently in an NFL training camp. Again, not sure. I haven't been able to keep everything so fresh here as we record this. I'm not sure if he was brought back to the practice squad, but Chris Odom can play. The fact of the matter is teams or scouts, they remember the last, College Gridiron Showcase, maybe the last time they see them. Yeah, he puts up numbers, but, he doesn't have that prototypical size. So to me, it's such a fine line. And the size cutoffs are a real thing in the NFL. Like, I try to sell players to teams and scouts, and they'll say, oh, his arms aren't long enough, or, doesn't really have the height that we need. And it's like, bro, did you pop on the film? The kid can play football. And so, like, I've always been a big believer. If he can play, you find a home for him. But the size, whether that's height, whether that's arm length, whether for some position it's hand size, is a very real thing. And I will say it's more of a real thing, I think, with the older scouts. I think the younger scouts are more open-minded from my observation. But, being labeled and the misconception or misperception that scouts have about players is unfortunately hard to overcome.
Yeah, Chris Odom was with the Browns. He had the ACL injury, so I think he would have obviously, and that I think he'll at least be kept on, kind of in the IR. But that's someone where he would have made the roster. We talk about the one USFL guy. I think Chris Odom would have been at least number 2 on that if that wouldn't have happened for him. So that's unfortunate because. And that relates to my question here. I guess I'll get to it now. Timeline, we've had debates for months on the podcast, XFL February to April, getting players out, right, this is the plan next year. USFL getting players out end of June, July, getting into the training camps. Is there a better or worse time between those two leagues in terms of trying to get guys to latch onto these NFL rosters?
Well, I don't know what's been reported. I know a lot of information that I'm not supposed to know, and I don't know what I can say or can't say, but my understanding is the XFL is going to have a draft in October, I believe.
November 16th.
Yeah, okay. So to me, the way I kind of see the landscape is XFL will have their first dibs on the premier talent that does not latch back onto the NFL. And I say that because, one, there comes more hype, The Rock, the NFL partnership, that whole situation, and the fact that they're going to be able to pay their players more, I think will have the better players kind of holding out hope for the XFL first and foremost. Now, I do see the USFL is plugging in players. They're signing guys to contracts. And, hopefully they can retain some of their guys. But I think the USFL is funded by Fox, essentially. And the TV contract that they have, all their funding is basically viewed as, the XFL, I do think, has some kind of entertainment element. But the way the funding of the USFL is more on an entertainment side than it is on a football side. The way the Fox suits, anyway, see this is cheap reality TV. I don't think it cost them, more than a couple $100,000 to fund that league. And, they did it on a dime, and they did it on the whim. And remember, there was zero marketing and zero hype leading up to the kickoff of the USFL, and give credit where credit is due, because they were out producing the NHL in terms of the ratings game. And so the USFL will be back. They'll continue to fund that. But I do think that since the XFL has more money, more cachet, more glitz and glamour, the bigger players are going to tend to hold out and wait there. But at the end of the day, the USFL did something that we haven't seen since the original USFL, which was complete spring season from start to finish. And there's something to be said about that.
This spring league that was the preface of the USFL, they crowned the championship. Luis Perez, played in the championship game. So, the Mega Bowl. Let's never forget the Mega Bowl. I just want to make sure. But I'm talking in terms of like all these guys got released from the USFL in June. Everyone gets signed to camps. We're talking every week, 5, 10, 20. Now they're all cut. Like, were they too late to the party? Were they too beat up? Were the teams are like, that's what I'm saying. If XFL gets players out in April and they're able to get into the early stuff in, early June and everything with the NFL camps going in versus USFL, having played 12 weeks and then jumping immediately in, like, do you see one or the other is better or worse?
No, I don't think one is better than the other. I think that, I think what you said about, are these guys too beat up? I mean, you do have to be worried about, even if it was like a 8-game season, but you tack on training camp and playoffs. I mean, it's a 3-4 week season. Then you go straight into an NFL training camp. And then if you happen to make a roster or a practice squad, you're essentially playing grown man tackle professional football year round, which could never be healthy on your body because you're never 100% when you're in season. So I think, there is a little bit of a concern there for me. I always thought personally a developmental league would be good if it coincided with the NFL season and played on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday nights, because now you're neck and neck with the NFL season. You're in game shape. I would love to see an allocated process where the old World League, European League, you had teams allocate some of these practice squad guys to a developmental league in season, play Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, play to the football audience. People are craving football 7 days a week. Now, whether that's the fall or the spring, I still am a big advocate of it. I don't know if there's an advantage with how the XFL is doing it over the USFL. I think a lot's going to be played out. I also am curious to see, with all the NIL and money floating around with some of these college players, there's 14,000 players sitting in the transfer portal. 40% of these guys never suit up ever again. I wonder if the XFL or even the USFL considers some of these players, because I think it's only a matter of time before one of these quarterbacks. I mean, look at the kid at USC. I mean, he's got 2 years until he can even be eligible for the NFL draft. If the XFL were to come along and say, hey, bro, come play for me, $5 million this year, then you can enter the draft. To me, you'd sell so many tickets, jerseys, boost your TV ratings. Like, I'd be throwing big money at some of these college players if I were one of these leagues. But hey, we shall see how that plays out.
Yeah, I just, we're trying to find the best. I was a big proponent of the April USFL timeline. I thought that was better for TV ratings and you're maybe not competing against March Madness, and then we had everyone bitch and moan that we're playing against the NHL and MLS and kind of all this stuff. So I don't really know, but just from your scouting and background, I just we debate a lot, layman on the podcast about it. So I was just kind of curious if it is just too late, because the USFL has proudly proclaimed this is the best time of year to get players into the NFL rosters. And now we see one guy make it. Chris Odom probably would have been a second. So that's why I'm just trying to figure out, like, is there a disconnect there, or is it just politics and bad luck from the NFL side with the players?
No, and I think that the USFL came together so quickly. I know it had been talked about, and they kind of teased us at the end of the spring league saying there was going to be a USFL. But if you remember, I think they were kind of holding their breath on the trademarks. There was a long gap there before they kind of officially announced that there was going to be a USFL. And I think they were somewhat trying to play catch up there with the player signings and trying to find the balance between, it's hard to find known commodities from street free agents, right? And so I know, like, talking to some of the XFL guys, it sounds like players that have, can't come out like within the past 3 years is going to make up like 95% of that league. So I think, maybe the USFL takes advantage of this undrafted free agent class because it is the largest undrafted free agent class we've ever seen in terms of volume, quality of UDFAs. That COVID-19 pandemic gave everyone a extra year of eligibility. So last year we saw the smallest draft class. This year we saw the biggest draft class. And a lot of these guys that went undrafted would typically be considered late round picks in previous years. So there's a lot of talent out there on the waiver wire. I'm hoping from a selfish standpoint that, the majority of the player pool is made up from, I would say, the COVID pandemic draft class up to this year's draft class. I think those are the players that really need to be identified and looked at. These veteran guys, hey, I'm all for it, but those guys usually are coming off an injury or a hiatus and need to kick off some rust. I think the NFL really wants to focus on some of these younger guys. I mean, if you're over the age of 25 now in the NFL, you're considered old. If you're 30 outside of the quarterback position, you're a dinosaur.
So, I mean, I guess what's next steps then for this? We get all these guys, didn't make it. USFL, we're going to go back. We're going to figure out between XFL, USFL, bringing in, a bunch more. So then is there like a surplus of talent then now in the spring football that we're trying to like place? I mean, what do you look at in terms of that and having two competing leagues? And I said we did a live stream the other day, like XFL did all these showcases and we're flying to Hawaii. We're going to, we're working, we're doing, Jackson State, right? We're doing HBCU. USFL didn't do any of that stuff. They fielded a team of 8 teams of, league of 8 teams now. Like you said, maybe they were playing catch up and they're going to do a lot more now headed into season 2. But what do you make of that and just kind of both of these leagues acquiring talent?
Well, I think with the USFL, you got a guy in Brian Woods who goes back to the UFL or whatever it was called. And, he knows this game. I mean, being in this segment, I can say especially hardcore for the last 4 years with the NFL PA Bowl, kind of being in that UDFA segment, the agent community knows who Brian Woods is. The agent community knows who guys like myself and Dane Vandernat are because they know that we give players opportunities. So I don't think I'll be honest with you here and people are going to get upset with me. I think a lot of these tryouts and workouts are more of a money grab. Because, you spend, if you're a player, $100, $200. It's not like, Hub Football, we have a select invitation process only. So we're not looking to just open the doors to anyone. We're not going to invite you out just to have bodies there. It's a vetted process. Whereas, these XFL workouts, and I love everybody working for the XFL, but, do the math. You charge $100, $200. You have 200 plus players at each of these workouts. These leagues don't have money coming in, and XFL is paying a lot of money for some of these executives they hired. So to me, the workouts almost are a revenue boost, maybe to help offset some of these salaries because they're bleeding money right now. USFL does not have this extravagant front office infrastructure. USFL is more of a centralized player pool, I believe, where, XFL is going to be responsible, independent GMs, independent coaching staffs, independent evaluation process, because they're already calling me independently, trying to pick my brain. So, I think USFL is more of a centralized player pool. Hey, get into this database system where the XFL, each team is going to have their own kind of scouting breakdown and wish list. And I think that's a pretty cool element.
It's crazy. And even getting into all this, I didn't anticipate on this today, but it is just so interesting. Like, I've bemoaned USFL for, the year now. Like, it's so cheap, and we have, it's a PR department of one and the social media team of a couple, and we have one director of player personnel for the whole league and all this stuff. And the XFL is like, we're going to have 87 people on all 8 teams doing all of this stuff. And you're like, okay, like, I think the truth exists somewhere in the middle there, but it is very interesting to see how both of these leagues are looking at it.
It's going to be interesting to see how you sustain that model because, I mean, look how fast before the COVID, the XFL burned through like $500 million like it was water.
Well, not that quite that much, but it was a lot.
Well, yeah, there was a lot of money there that they burned through. And then they went and got the Carolina Hurricanes owner and they burned through his cash too pretty fast. So that's what I mean. Like USFL did it on a couple $100,000. XFL is going to cost you millions, hundreds of millions, if not, to sustain long term. And where does that money come from? Does it come from ticket sales? Does it come from merchandise? Does it come from reality TV? Because The Rock has this big movie production company and he's the #1 grossing actor. So it's almost like they need to lean on that entertainment value, that entertainment dollar in order to generate the revenue necessary to pay all these people. And their salaries are going to be much more competitive. I mean, I know The Rock has a lot of money and they acquired this XFL 10 cents on the dollar, it seems like, for the logo and the equipment. And it seems like they made smart, sound decisions, putting teams into cities that are thirsty in those markets. And I do like, I mean, listen, they're not stupid. Their headquarters, they're going to practice all week in Texas. But, oh, by the way, 3 of the teams are based in Texas. So that means 6 teams really don't have to travel that far for those home games each week if you're playing 3 games in Texas. So I think that they've tweaked the model to try to minimize some of their risk. But again, you're talking about boku bucks. That's the main reason why none of these spring leagues have ever sustained, because it does cost a significant amount of money to sustain over the course of time.
Last question for you, because I know we're hitting up the wall here, and I appreciate your time. It is curious. I had bar trivia a couple weeks ago, and they said The Rock has had so many flops that if you do the math, like he actually only, like his gross per movie average over his career is actually quite low, just because he's had so many like tooth fairies to as many like Fast and the Furious. But last thought, XFL working with the NFL, Alumni Academy and all that, right? I've almost equated it to like it's like Survivor Redemption Island. Like if you don't make it in the NFL and you get in this and you get a shot with the XFL, like thoughts on that working together with the XFL before I let you go?
Yeah, I think what the NFL Academy has done, they tried to implement a developmental program. They were last year with Coach Mike Tice and Chip Smith really honing in on developing offensive line and running back. So that was kind of their major point of emphasis. And now with this XFL partnership, it's almost like the equivalent of the 9th team, right? Hey, go up to Canton. There's a whole campus up there that you can train and stay ready. Now, how many guys want to stay in Canton during the winter time, kind of isolated? It's in the middle of nowhere, but it is a developmental program to stay and continue your professional playing career. And I think what's also cool is, like Rock said, if you don't get picked up by the NFL and you participate in the XFL this year, you automatically have an invitation to come back and play another season. So I think they're going to be ultra selective. I like, the partnership with the NFL. Now they have kind of a training ground to test out new rules. And, I don't think the NFL will ever invest into a spring league, but just the fact that they put their name and attached it to the XFL was a big, big step, because they've been reluctant to do that in recent history. So I think it's a sign of things to come. I think they'll continue to explore how they develop that. And I heard what you said about The Rock, but just like football, man, you're only as good as your last game. I think he was the #1 grossing actor last year. So he's still got some money in the kitty there.
No, it was like one of those snuppers, like Emma Watson with the Harry Potter franchise, like outdraws The Rock like 5-1 at the box office, and you would never just, because like you said, it's selective, whatever. Rick, I really appreciate your time. This is great, hopping on, and it just crazy week with everything. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, Reed, anytime, man. Love chopping it up. You guys do a great job at the Markcast, and anytime you want to do it again, just let me know.
Awesome, thanks.
All right, brother.
Well, I'm thrilled today. We have Matthew Scianitti joining us, CFL here, and just landed in Montreal, getting ready. We're covering the big game tomorrow, but crazy week so far. What have you made of, first of all, thank you for coming on. And what have you made of all the craziness this week?
I'd be lying if I didn't say, especially because it has to do with the Alouettes, that it doesn't surprise me. But after everything that's happened with this franchise over the last 10 years, really ever since kind of the end of the Anthony Calvillo era, there has always been something that has happened over the course of one season to the next to keep it interesting in Montreal. Now, I'll start with, obviously, the issue with Gary Stern. Family estates and those sort of things can be very, very tricky scenarios, and those are very personal matters. And if Mr. Stern feels that he can't fulfill his obligations, day-to-day obligations, as he said, that it's probably good for the franchise that he steps away. It's not good for the CFL, obviously, because it probably means they're going to have to find a new owner or ownership group to take over the Alouettes. And there was certainly a ton of positive momentum a few years ago, especially building off of, and I was here for that 2019 playoff game when, funny enough, they lost to a team quarterback by Trevor Harris. And there was, being at Percival Molson, hearing the energy of the crowd, knowing how they had taken to Vernon Adams Jr., and then to feel that positive momentum after, the team was essentially purchased. But then to see, first of all, the fire of Kahari Jones and Danny Machocha taking over, and then everything that's happened over the last week, it does put a damper on it. But that doesn't diminish the fact that the Owls have an opportunity here to still not only host a playoff game, but to get first in the East. I mean, the East is that close at the moment. So I know Trevor Harris is a quarterback and what he's like as a leader in the room. He is one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the regular season in terms of completion percentage and what he can do getting a team to the playoffs that we've had in the last 10 years. So certainly the faith in Trevor Harris is well placed. However, that stability, that sense of stability, it's been a long time since we felt it in Montreal. So the league, again, is not maybe starting from square one with the team necessarily, but I imagine the league itself, the head office, Commissioner Randy Ambrosie, and the other 8 teams were probably a little more anxious about the situation this morning than they were last week.
Well, yeah, and, especially because, we had followed and we had Gary Stern on a while ago too. And even trying to get him to, purchase a team, him and his father-in-law, it felt like Randy Ambrosie really had to sell, right? We got to get someone in here. We got to do this. And now it's like Randy's got to, put back on the salesman hat kind of and go at it again. And, obviously I don't know if we do it, here a season, get through the season, whatever, but it just certainly seems like something else to pile onto the commissioner's plate at this point.
Yeah, it really is unfortunate because Randy Ambrosie, every time he feels like, and I really do feel for him, every time you feel like, let's take Atlantic Canada, for example. I've been lucky enough to cover the last 2 Touchdown Atlantics, one in Moncton, one in Halifax or Wolfville, Nova Scotia, on the North Coast. Both were great experiences. The fans were fantastic. The community in both cities was awesome, really embraced the game. And then you feel like they're that close. The Halifax Council is talking about a stadium. They've passed initial budget for it. You're seeing the initial renderings for it. And then pandemic hits. And it really takes just the steam out of the whole thing. Now we go back to Wolfville and you feel like the momentum is building again, but still, they're still a little nervous about the situation, just given obviously everything that's happened around the pandemic and what's done to the healthcare system in Canada, especially out in Atlantic Canada. And you take a look at the Montreal situation, you take a look at the situation in BC, you take a look at the situation in Edmonton. Every time there feels like there's positive momentum, there's just something that seems to, I don't want to say affected so much that it becomes a negative, because BC is still a tremendously positive situation with a new owner in there, irrespective of what happened to Nathan Rourke, and new president in Edmonton, name change in Edmonton. certainly looks good, but the team still isn't winning, and certainly not winning at all, if at all, at Commonwealth. So Randy Ambrosie is kind of expecting challenges, I think, at this point. But Montreal is still an important franchise. As I go back to that playoff game in 2019, not only having a French-Canadian franchise on top of a bilingual franchise in the Ottawa Redblacks, but to be able to have a franchise that brings that kind of passion that, you know, the Montreal sports community can bring. CFL has shown that it can work in this city. I mean, when Anthony Calvillo was here for those years, it was really the hottest ticket in the CFL for a long time. So it's just trying to find and maintain a culture with an ownership group that is invested in the long term here. Partly that has to do with sustained success in the field, which the Owls haven't had in a long time. And part of it is having an owner that the league can have that says, okay, like, we're invested here. We're invested in the community because we see an opportunity here. And I would like to think, you know, Bob Wettenall had the team for a long, long time, and through all those successful years, all those Grey Cup appearances and those Grey Cup championships. But you have to be able to, if you're the league, sell someone on the idea of this is not like, well, if you invest, it could be successful. This has been successful. If you have the right football people around, the community embraces it. The city loves it. It's always a great day out. There isn't. I was talking to Marshall Ferguson last night. On a beautiful day, there isn't a more picturesque place to watch a football game, especially if you're sitting hillside looking out towards, old Montreal. There really isn't a more picturesque place to watch a football game than Percival Molson. And there isn't a better atmosphere when the crowd is really into it. And I know Rough Riders fans and Blue Bomber fans will take exception to this, but I have been here at playoff games. It's awesome. So really, it just comes down to the league. Yet again, another challenge of trying to find an ownership group. But you have to give Randy Ambrosie this credit. He is somebody who, irrespective of the challenges, has come out time and again excited and willing and really invested in trying to solve these little quagmires that keep popping up across the league.
What happened with Vernon Adams in Montreal? You know, we had him on. He got this big. You know, we're bringing him in, signing him. I mean, I'm excited. He lives down in Tacoma. You know, he's from, not 20 minutes from where I live. And, it never really felt like his team. It felt like they put in Trevor Harris. I know injuries and stuff, but it never really felt like he was given a fair shake this year in Montreal.
You know, Reed, it's interesting because I was also mentioning to our CFL and TSN crew about Vernon Adams Jr. that he has squeezed so much life out of the CFL experience. He has been with so many teams. I remember when he was with the Ticats, when he was a fourth-string quarterback, and they still had fourth-string quarterbacks in the CFL, he was willing to do anything the team asked him to do, to stay on the team, to be a part of the culture, to get his opportunity. He has worked from the time that his rights were traded initially from BC back to Montreal, and then he spends time with the Rough Riders, and he's with the Ticats, and then he's with Montreal again. And he always comes in with a positive attitude. I will never, ever say that Vernon Adams Jr. doesn't have the right attitude to play in the professional game, because he does. And we have seen him when he has a tremendous amount of self-belief. There isn't a throw he can't make. He is one of the most exciting. It's a reason why they fell in love with him here. He is one of the most exciting players at the quarterback position in our league. But you cannot deny that the moves that have happened, how many times he's been put from one place to another, the amount of work he's had to put into it. And then obviously finding himself in the injury situation in Montreal. And then Trevor Harris comes in, and now he's battling for a quarterback position that he didn't think because he thought he was the guy. It takes a toll on you. Undoubtedly, it takes a toll on you. So he now goes to what will benefit him is this. He's going to a BC Lions team that really is, you subtract Nathan Rourke from it, is still a great team. They have got dynamic playmakers. They've got, Ryan Phillips in that defense. They really can cause teams a lot of problems. If he comes in there and has a tremendous amount of that self-belief that often has gone up and down with him. And Rick Campbell's a fantastic head coach. I mean, Grey Cup winning head coach back in 2016. He's got a culture there in which he can feel he can thrive. Not only that, he's not, as you just mentioned, he's not too far away from where he usually spends his offseason. So this should be a great, great situation. And knowing the leaders in that room, you talk about Brian Burnham, knowing the connection he's going to have to have with Brian Burnham. He's going to have people in there who are going to rally around him and make him feel like he belongs. And yes, this is, again, I go back to the situation of kind of self-belief. The BC Lions are Nathan Rourke's team. Everything he's done this year, undoubtedly. But Vernon Adams can go in knowing where BC stands in the standings right now and say, you know what? I can do something special this year with this team, and it could really benefit me in the long run as long as I go in there knowing, as he said to me many times, I know I'm Vernon Adams. I know what I can do, and I just have to focus on myself, and my abilities will show for themselves.
I'm afraid, we're Vernon fans. I heard, the night before, okay, look for him, BC, all this stuff. I, texted some people. We're doing backflips, right? We all love Vernon Adams. People still, on Facebook, oh, he's not, he's got his detractors. Like, I'm just worried. I get sink or swim time. Like, it really is. Like, if Vernon can't make it work with this receiver core, with this team, with everything this year, being 8-2 right now, ahead in the standings, like, I mean, this could be his last real shot, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. But I could tell you, I've been around this league a long time, as I'm sure you have, watching and covering it in your own way. There's always a place for somebody, there are oftentimes you see in press releases or I'm on the sidelines and being like, wow, that guy is still in the league. And not that it's a fault of a person's abilities or that they're not a good person. No. But you feel like they have been around the merry-go-round so many times that there's going to come a point where someone's going to say, you know what, man, you've had your shot. But I think with Vernon, because, as I said, so many people have seen when he has those games and he just plays free. And perhaps he plays off schedule. He breaks contain. He throws a 40-yard dime, on the run. Those games, they tease you because you think, wow, this guy can be everything that you want a CFL quarterback to be. But it's all down to him. And as you say, there does come a point where coaches and GMs start to say, as we enter an era in the CFL where, listen, Bo Levi Mitchell is no longer, at least at this point, not the starter. Trevor Harris has been around this league quite a long time as well. Of that core group of successful quarterback, even Cody Fajardo's now, there are some detractors emerging in Saskatchewan. The leagues will be, and this quarterback situation in Hamilton, leagues will be looking for new, fresh talent because right now the only person in the league who can perhaps say that his job is uncontested as I just go in my mental Rolodex throughout the league might be Zach Collaros, and that's it, right? And that's on a team that's looking to win a third straight Grey Cup. So this is really, all these teams across the league are in a show me moment. And the one thing about it, quarterback is the important position in football, but in the CFL, given how dynamic the game is and what it requires of a quarterback is even more important, and how they can affect a game and affect an offense. So if you're Vernon Adams, I mean, man, a lot of teams are looking for quarterbacks, but they might not want retreads anymore. They might be looking for fresh talent. So as you say, he's got to be successful, especially with the weapons that he has around.
Are you surprised of how quickly, because it was all week, it was, oh, BC, we got Michael O'Connor, like, we're fine, like, we're, the utmost confidence in the room. Obviously he went down, the hit and all that stuff, but, like, then it was, we're making a move right now. Like, we got to get Vernon. It seemed like it was a very quick about face there with the BC team.
Yeah, I can tell you that being around Rick Campbell and, McAvoy, but especially Rick Campbell, he's never going to show his cards, but I think Coach Campbell also understands the talent that he has around him. I mean, when Nathan Rourke went down, the first person I felt for was Brian Burnham. I was like, yes, he had Michael Riley, but that team with Michael Riley wasn't as consistent. They didn't have the pieces to be bona fide contenders. And I imagine you look at the way Brian Burnham was playing and making catches for Nathan Rourke and thinking, wow, man, this guy says, we've got a team now. And I imagine Rick Campbell looked at that room and is like, wow, we've got a team here and we can't waste this year because you don't know what's going to happen in 2023. So I imagine that there are always plans in place, maybe not for, Vernon specifically, but looking at the option saying, who can we bring in here? And it's not to cast aspersions of Michael O'Connor at all. But it is a lot to put on any quarterback all of a sudden to come in if you're a backup and be like, okay, well, Nathan Rourke just set the world on fire in a way that no quarterback, American or Canadian, has in a long time in this league. And you've got to go ahead and try to go and be successful right away. And then he gets injured. And now, Rick Campbell and Neil McElroy in that front office has to say, we've got to make a decision. And if Vernon can be the guy and he works with the elements in the room, that's great. But I can tell you, front offices always have a plan. It's a small league. And everyone at some point knows everybody else's business. But there was, I imagine, this was not something that just came up willy-nilly. This was not impulsive. This was, hey, let's see what happens. And if we've got to push that button or we got to pull that lever to bring in, maybe it wasn't Vernon their first option, but I imagine he was at the top of the list. We'll do it. And the one thing about Rick Campbell, think about 2016. He had Trevor Harris. Trevor Harris had led them to pretty much a successful regular season. Rick Campbell was decisive. He pulled the trigger and brought Henry Burris in when he felt, okay, we've got a group here and we can't waste this moment. And I don't think it was any kind of commentary on Trevor Harris's opinion. He just looked at it and said, okay, I've got Henry Burris with right here and I've got Trevor Harris and I'm making a decision. I'm going to be decisive. Rick Campbell's the decisive coach. It led to a Grey Cup championship in 2016. I'm not going to make a big pronouncement and say it'll lead to a Grey Cup in 2022. But he's made that decision because he believes his team can win now.
Last question for you. I just am so curious the timing of, the Gary Stearns departure, right? Farhan was coming out saying that maybe Gary was, blocking trades, things like that. When we had Gary on, he spoke, glowingly of Vernon Adams, that his grandchildren spent time with Vernon and all this stuff. I said, well, what do you think about Trevor Harris? He goes, I don't know if I've even met him at this point. And I'm like, okay, this seems weird dynamic that way, knowing maybe that Gary, it's just like, if Gary doesn't step down over the weekend, right, Vernon's not in BC right now. Like, I'm just curious, like chicken, egg, and kind of how all that, your thoughts on that all,
Yeah, it is. I know you and others will be looking for a there. And that is, given the nature of the league, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I can say this about Trevor Harris. I've known Trevor for a long time. When I first covered the league, I was fortunate enough to cover the 2012 Argos, which is coached by Scott Milanovich, in which the third string quarterback was Trevor Harris. And the fourth string quarterback was Zach Collaros. Trevor is all about football. Trevor also, much like Vernon, realizes what this is. This could be one of the last opportunities for him. And the one thing that I can say about Trevor, not to deviate from your original question, but is this. Trevor Harris has won 2 Grey Cups, both as a backup quarterback. And he has always had a tremendous amount of self-belief and commitment to the game. It's not saying that Vernon doesn't, but I think Vernon understood and embraced the idea of being the face of this franchise, of being the face of the Montreal Alouettes. And with that comes, and you look at it through other examples across the league. So immediate one that comes to mind is Simone Lawrence. Simone Lawrence is the face of the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and he's involved and very close to the front office staff and the ownership group. He's very prominent in the community. And I think Vernon, in a lot of ways, was like, okay, if I'm the guy, I'm going to be heavily invested in this community. It's not that I don't think Trevor Harris is invested in Montreal, but Trevor Harris is invested in his playbook and invested in winning. Does that move happen if Gary Stern is the still part of that ownership group, still kind of the primary guy in a situation of influence? I think it's a good question to ask. I'm not sure, because I do know, given all of the big confident pronouncements that Gary Stern would make on social media, that he believed in the team and he believed in Vernon Adams. But that's not the way the CFL goes all the time. I can tell you, and I remember when Johnny Manziel was here in Montreal, and his first professional pass in a professional game in the CFL went right into the hands of Larry Dean. And it was just like, you have all of these grand plans and then they can just fall apart right away in the CFL. this is a league where it keeps you on your toes, where you have to adapt, and you have to be willing to change very, very quickly, because you might be forced to change very, very quickly. The Alouettes are now looking for a new ownership group. They're now looking for someone who is going to be invested, as I said, in the community and this team. And consequently, they're looking for a new face of the franchise, because I don't necessarily think that Trevor's invested in his team, in the guys in the field, but he's invested in winning that Grey Cup. And if it means winning it in Montreal, he will win it in Montreal. But this team needs a face. Vernon Adams was the face for a very short period of time. Now he's off to BC himself to try to prove something and win a Grey Cup. At the end of the day, to bring it back to what we were originally talking about, the Alouettes are still left lacking and still left wanting, not just the franchise, but the fans as well. Everything can change in the CFL in a week, in a day, in an hour. I've seen all of those things happen. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on. But yeah, revisionist history sometimes being 2020, oftentimes being 2020. Yes, I think things would have been different if Gary Stern was still part of the ownership group.
Well, Matthew, I really appreciate your time fitting us in. Good luck covering the games and everything else you have going on this weekend. Thank you so much.
And thank you for what you do covering the league. It's really awesome to be able to talk to a big fan who lives in the States. So I appreciate you.
Well, I had a bilingual David Cote on last week, and now we have an Australian accented Cody Grace on this week. Thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, thanks, man. I'm excited to be on. Cheers for having me.
This is good. So a global player coming into the CFL. Calgary, I don't love it when Calgary is successful as a BC Lions fan here in the West, but certainly it's good to see you guys doing well this season. What's the season been like for you so far?
It's been good. It's obviously been a ride. We've had our ups and downs, but I think, we've got a really good opportunity coming in the next month to really, play two good teams. We play 4 games and we've got BC twice and Edmonton twice. So it's a really good opportunity for us coming, towards the playoffs and that second half of the season. So, we're excited about what's coming and what we can do.
Certainly looking at Edmonton, you have to feel a little bit better than BC in terms of kind of, your chances on that. But obviously the home and home with that, does that any special concern or anything, when you do the back-to-back home and home and kind of how you approach those games?
It's Labor Day. That's always dangerous for any team, and Edmonton, they can be dangerous, especially on these rivalry games. So, you never take a foot back on them. They're dangerous. So, we look at every opponent the same, and definitely Edmonton, coming on Monday is going to be a tough gig.
Really excited for you guys. Obviously, Jake Mayer, we had him on kind of preseason and all that stuff. Do you feel? I know there's been in the bow and all that, but just like locker room and how does it feel now? Like kind of coming off, him playing well, and how do you guys, thoughts kind of looking forward now?
We're confident in all 3 of those QBs that we've got. They're all great leaders, great dudes, and I think the example that Bo's set, and the outcome he's kind of had with Jake going in as well. We've just got to follow that lead, and whoever's there, we have great confidence in, and it's a great locker room to be in, with those type of scenarios. So, we've got confidence in all 3 of those guys, whatever the rotation is.
What's it like transitioning from, and you've probably been asked this a million times, but transitioning, to Calgary? You're from Australia, and what's it been like? Do you enjoy living in the city? Do you enjoy Calgary?
Yeah, Calgary reminds me a lot of home. Like the people, the culture. It's very relaxed, very friendly people. So it's been a good adaptation to it. I haven't really had to really go out of my way to kind of feel comfortable. It's just naturally been a good kind of sit down, and I'm happy to be here. From what I've heard, it's the better place to be in terms of kind of making that transition from Australia to Canada. There's so many Aussies and Kiwis around this city, so it's been good for me. It's never been an issue, traveling and get to know people, but I think I'm very lucky to be in Calgary, that's for sure.
Well, it seems really warm. I mean, like I said, we've had a bunch of players on, and everyone speaks to that, and it's a really good place to live. And like I know that was one of the big reasons Jake Mayer was even saying like he just loved living in the city. And obviously, you guys have tremendous coaching staff and management and everybody there. What do you make of your coaches and coordinators and people working with you and the team that Calgary's put together?
Yeah, man, they push us. It's specifically my special teams coordinator, Mark Killam. He's always pushing us to be the best specialists that we can be. And it's not necessarily us just being specialists and kind of sitting to the side. He expects us and the coaches expect us to be forms of leaders. And Renee has kind of shown that as how good he's been, and it's not us necessarily talking and being those vocals guys. It's just doing our job and creating opportunities for other people on that team by executing. So that's always been kind of the standard that the coaches have set upon us. It's we just let our actions talk, and all that stuff kind of takes care of itself. You just listen to the coaches. They're always giving us good feedback. And we try to show it come game day. We've been a good group from the specialist kind of point of view in that.
How have you felt like your season's gone thus far, just you personally, and how you've been playing?
I had a slow start. Obviously, I missed the first couple of games due to injury. So, it's you want those first early games, kind of get your rhythm and the flow of the game, and kind of boost your confidence with those first couple of games. So I took a seat back and watched another guy punt, and it's always a challenge watching someone do what you're doing, and you just got to be a good teammate in that regard. And I feel like those type of things always pay itself forward, and now we're starting to get in a bit of a groove. So as a punt unit, I always try to push those guys, and I expect those guys to push me. We all 12 of us play together. So, we're starting to show that, we're one of the better units coming around as well. So we always pride ourselves on that. And it's always just a week at a time. So, I'm excited for what's coming forward. We got some great games coming up and great opportunities for us.
Coming in as a global player, does that put more pressure on your shoulders, Chip? I mean, you want to showcase the best you can, or are you just head down and you just kind of punt no matter what?
No, I mean, it's funny, the whole global label, there's always been, there was Australian guys in the league before I was there. It's just now they've kind of created a label and kind of created that program. So it's just another, just another player really for me. I kind of see that, and it's been good, I guess, to kind of highlight, the other people and nationalities that are in the CFL now. But, it's always been there. So it's just one of those things, man,
No, I do think, like you said, though, I think it's important to kind of denote that so people know it, just because it highlights more than anything, but not have it be, like some big sticking point that's got to be on. But I do think it's important to know, like, hey, here, the CFL, we're welcome to all these guys, a collection of wonderful talent kind of from around the world. So, yeah,
and it's creating a lot of opportunities for, guys from, those countries that don't grow up with football, obviously Australia, but, you got Brazil, UK, Germany and everywhere. So it's good to kind of see, I guess, for the fans to kind of get that content and realizing that, there's guys that didn't grow up with it that are now in Canada playing.
What do you do when you're not punting the ball and dealing with all the wonderful coaching staff and everything else? Or what do you do outside the game?
Man, I live right next to the river, so I'm always down there. I love my bike riding. I kind of get out and about, so there's a lot to do around Calgary. Obviously got Banff and Lake Louise up there, so you try to plan little things in the afternoons, but usually, I'll do those in the days off that we've got. But in the afternoon, it's really more about recovery, after we've had practice. So, you try to do what you can, whether it be yoga or things like that. You kind of fill with your afternoons that you got free. That's what I do. And a bit of a bookworm, so get my nose in the books. So, things like that. Just keep the mind busy and always learning and trying to, get your body back ready for the next day.
What kind of books?
Man, I'm a bit of a philosophy nerd, so I get into a bit of Roman stuff like Marcus Aurelius type stuff, Seneca. So it's yeah, I don't mind that stuff. It's quite unique in how they were thinking, you know, thousands of years ago, 2,000 years ago, how it relates today. So yeah, it's not something that people really know about me, but yeah, I try to dabble in that when I can.
What did you study in school?
I was an exercise science major, so I was getting into strength and conditioning when I was going to school in the US. So I was yeah, a bit of a meathead, lifting weights and things like that. So yeah, I thought I'd take a step back and put my nose into some books and things like that. To yeah.
Well, you could be, yeah, it could be a modern day philosopher here. I like that.
So, something like that.
I mean, good locker room vibes, good feelings. I mean, how are you guys just in general mindset here at what we're like almost more than halfway through the season?
I mean, we're a young locker room, so it's, you know, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of good vibes in there, I guess is kind of the word to say. So, you know, we know what we want and what the standard is. So everyone kind of just feeds off that. So it's never been a problem having, you know, any locker room kind of lulls or anything like that. You know, we're a young group and there's plenty of energy in there for sure.
Okay, I wish you luck here the next couple weeks, and then maybe not as much luck against the Lions, but I wish you luck. Nonetheless, I really appreciate you taking time today to come on. Good luck. I know you guys have like the late game this week, and then it's a quick turnaround next week. So I really appreciate your time today.
No worries, mate. Appreciate it.
Want to thank all of our guests for coming on today. Brendan over at Sportico, Rick, and Matthew Scianitti, and Cody Grace. I really appreciate everybody taking the time. You know, busy schedules, everybody covering the CFL season, NFL season coming up, plus everyone's day-to-day life. So really appreciate that. Like I said at the top, don't forget our big Spring League football giveaway here coming up. Like and subscribe. Share the podcast. You know, you see it on Twitter, give it a retweet. See it on Facebook, share it, give a comment, all that stuff. A lot of work. I can never hold this right to get it on the camera, but you know, a lot of work going into all this. I also think I have a new webcam here coming up soon. I was looking into that, doing some off-season wedding here as we approach the off-season investments. I think I have a nice little new webcam coming, so we'll see how that works out. Before I go, I tell you guys all the time, if you get items for the giveaway, so appreciate you sending them over. I had two. Zach, I missed Zach's last week. I was so excited to show all the Spring League merchandise and all that. But here we have our photo of Zach. Zach won, I believe, back in the day, one of the misprinted XFL Markcast hats. Here you see Zach in a much better looking Grey Cup toque from the Grey Cup in Hamilton. He's got his USFL kickoff. Remember, we were there. Rally towel, courtesy of Dustin over at Royal Retros. And then the Grey Cup face mask there. Really appreciate Zach is, I think, one of the longest time listeners we have. I think Zach, Jenna, a couple of you guys go back a long way on that. So I really appreciate that. And then these are exciting photos. So this is Mark I'm going to get his text here, but this is Mark from Toronto. He says, thank you so much. Mark won the AAF Commanders jersey. Thank you so much for sending up the Commanders jersey. I might be the only person rocking an AAF San Antonio's Commanders jersey in the whole country. Photos attached. And Mark has a question, and I thought this was good to bring up. Mark said, what is the best way to support the show? We have people have asked me, we have Patreon. Do you want to do that? I've never liked the idea of doing a Patreon because I don't want to segment out the viewership that we get, right? I like the videos to be up on YouTube, be able to search and Google and kind of the SEO and all that. But there is a thanks button on the YouTube. Like as you watch this, I think I've enabled it. And certainly when we do the live streams, you can leave a tip. But if you ever, feel the need, I do this kind of for the love of everything. And I just kind of like getting the subscribers and the notoriety and all of that. I appreciate, seeing who we can get on the show and the information we can provide you guys. But if you did ever want to support it, I do believe you can leave that thanks button. I know YouTube will probably get a cut, but I do know that goes to me as well. You would be surprised how little YouTube pays out every month for all this. But if you're like Mark, if you ever wanted that, I spent buku bucks here, as Rick said earlier with the XFL spending buku dollars, but a lot of time and money, energy goes into this. So if you ever felt the need, you can certainly do that. But Mark had a question and we're showing off his jersey as well. So really appreciate that. I think that'll do it for me today. Like I said, should be a huge show next week. Look forward to that. NFL kickoff. Lots of excitement here. Football has never left, but it's certainly back now. I am an NFL fan as well, equally as excited as I am for the other league. So really exciting for me to have everything back as well. I don't know how I feel about our Washington Commanders' chances this year, but otherwise should be good. Buffalo and the Rams kickoff on Thursday should be good next week. Thank you guys all so much for your love and support. Take care, stay safe, like and subscribe. Thanks.